With an emphasis on precise strikes, the Vanquisher seeks to destroy their opponents through an onslaught of critical hits. But here's the question, what is a Vanquisher? Well, the Vanquisher subclass is my improvement on the Champion subclass. For years in my games, I've been running this subclass instead of the Champion. This is because while I love the Champion's simple design, it is rather weak. And for most of my players, eventually they want something more than the simplicity that the Champion provides. Or at the very least, something a bit more powerful that adds some more utility. So first and foremost, let me walk you through a few of the Vanquisher subclass features. At 3rd level, the Vanquisher picks up Lethal Critical. This is pretty simple and is directly from the Champion. It doubles your chance for critical hits, and I think that this type of feature is for people that are just trying to learn the game, or veterans who don't want to think too hard in combat. You see, that's who this subclass was made for. But a huge flaw of the Champion subclass is that they just give you Lethal Critical at 3rd level and no other utility feature. There is more to D&D 5th edition than just combat, which is why the Vanquisher has the 3rd level ability Physical Mastery. You can think of this as like the Eloquence Bard's Silver Tongue. If you roll below a 9 on an athletics or an acrobatics check, it becomes a 10. This is incredibly simple for new players to use and understand. Plus, it encourages risks and outside the box thinking. I think the best quality of new players is that they know nothing about the game, so their creativity is running wild. They push the boundaries of what's possible because they don't know what's possible. Now, sometimes the dice don't go their way, and over time, veteran players become less dynamic. With this feature though, that gives a floor to athletics and acrobatic skill checks, it encourages new players to go beyond and to push those boundaries, while also offering a safety net. Plus, in my opinion, reliable talent in athletics and acrobatics is far less trouble in most campaigns than reliable talent in persuasion and deception. So that's what the Vanquisher is rocking with at 3rd level. At 7th level though, we kick it up a notch. The Vanquisher gets its Vicious Strike feature. You see, critical hits are up to chance. Some nights you're going to be on fire and rolling many of them. Other nights you're not going to be able to roll above a 5 to save your life. So what Vicious Strike offers is a way to secure your critical hits tactically. Essentially, what this subclass feature is pushing Vanquishers to do is to find advantage at all costs. For new players, it should hopefully introduce them to many more different game mechanics in their own time. Many conditions like the blinded or prone condition offer advantage if you're attacking a creature with that condition. Or, full disclosure, I use the flanking rules in my game, and so Vicious Strike isn't difficult to pull off. It just requires players to work with each other as a team. That way they can get flanking. Or if that's not possible, players tend to use the shove attack to gain advantage. Plus, I found that the once per action wording allows fighters to better use their action surge. Fighters tend to hold that action surge for longer until they get advantage on the creature they really want to damage. Vicious Strike has always been a hit at my tables and something that once players get the hang of, they tend to love. But wait, there's more at 7th level, Refined Movement. This 7th level utility feature just increases the fighter's movement. Not through their movement speed necessarily, but by giving them a freedom to move around the battlefield as they like. This feature helps to encourage fighters to get advantage via flanking, because they can run up and team with other players on the battlefield. Also, this feature gives the Vanquisher a climbing and swimming speed, and I don't want you to underestimate just how powerful it is to give a fighter a climbing speed. A creative player can get a lot out of a climbing speed. This feature also helps to reinforce the fantasy that the Vanquisher is putting forward. You are a physically imposing person, an action movie star in a D&D setting. You can run through difficult terrain, avoid attacks of opportunity, climb sheer cliffs, and swim through the ocean like it's nothing. While providing fantastic utility, Refined Movement also just helps to add to the fantasy of this character. At 10th level though, the Vanquisher gets arguably its best subclass feature. You see, most groups don't go past 10th level, which is why I think it's stupid to have capstone features be at 18th level for this subclass. Honestly, I think that late game abilities should be aspirational and mind-breakingly powerful. But a capstone, in my mind, is a synthesis of everything that came before in a subclass. It is supposed to tie all previous subclass features together. And that's what Bloodlusted Critical is all about. The previous features for this subclass in combat have always been about making sure you can get crits more often. Now, with Bloodlusted Critical, we are making sure those critical hits are even better. At 10th level, you can choose from one of 3 benefits benefits when you score a critical hit. The first benefit is arguably the most powerful and allows the Vanquisher to keep on the front line of combat, as whenever you score a critical hit, you can decide to regain an amount of hit points equal to your fighter level. This ability basically reads heal 10% of your max HP when you score a critical hit. It is very good if you're getting 1 or 2 critical hits a turn. This benefit also synergizes well with Action Surge for a quick 20 points of healing at 10th level. Say you're knocked unconscious and a cleric can only spare a first level healing word on you, or you roll a nat 20 and pick yourself up from unconsciousness at 1 hit point. Well, an Action Surging Vanquisher with advantage can easily regain another 20 hit points and get back in the fight. Now, the second benefit of Bloodlusted Critical gives advantage on the next save, and this is great against spellcasters or enemies that impose a lot of saves on you. And this also helps to cover up a Vanquisher's biggest weakness against spellcasters, which is poor mental saving throws. Advantage just offers you a fighting chance to succeed on that critical save. Plus, at this level you have Indomitable to back you up in case you're really rolling poorly that night. And your final ability is kind of like a crowd control ability. If you can't outright kill a creature that's harassing the backline of your party, you can always attempt to try and apply the Frighten condition to them, because the Frighten condition is a powerful offensive and defensive measure. Now, this benefit isn't guaranteed and it only targets one creature, but it is supposed to be used situationally and comes in clutch when a Vanquisher is able to pull off the Frighten. Also at 10th level, you're getting your final utility ability, Faultless Physique. This feature, again, is fairly simple but powerful. You gain proficiency in all strength and dexterity skills, which kind of helps to round out your archetype of physical perfection. Additionally, you basically gain expertise in either athletics or acrobatics checks. And look, you should be hitting 23 in either athletics or acrobatics easily here. At this level, you're superhuman, which is what I think a high-level fighter should be. By 10th level, you've gone past just some person with a sword. And I think fighter subclasses should reflect that from 10th level onward. As for the Vanquisher's other features, Devastating Critical and Honed Strikes, I won't talk about them specifically in this video. If you want to learn what they are, hop over to my website and you can buy the subclass. The PDF comes with the entire subclass, plus an in-depth guide for DMs about running games for a Vanquisher, just tips that I've gathered over hundreds of hours of playtesting this subclass, and a quick build for new players. Or you can hop over to my new Patreon and get this subclass and many more for free at any tier of patronage. Finally though, we can move on to the regular parts of a why you should play video. So this is why you should play a Vanquisher. Let's talk about what I think are the benefits of this subclass. Firstly, focusing on critical hits. I said it in the champion video, but I always thought there should have been a subclass that focuses on a player getting critical hits. Not only does this subclass make getting critical hits more consistent, but it also makes those critical hits better over time. And let's talk about time in the context of the Vanquisher, because I think one of the things I'm proud of most about this subclass is the increasing complexity over time. You start out with very simple features. They basically happen on their own and they are powerful, but a new player doesn't need to do too much. However, as your campaign progresses, the Vanquisher progresses in terms of power and complexity. Just when this subclass is starting to feel just a bit stale or is falling behind maybe some of the other party members, it comes in with a new feature that spices up gameplay. These new features are also specially designed to walk players through different mechanics in 5th edition. If you go from level 3 to level 20 with a Vanquisher, you should have a great understanding of some of the core mechanics of D&D 5th edition. Additionally, this fighter subclass has strong utility options. D&D is more than just a war game, it is a role-playing game. The champion's out-of-combat features really just don't cut it. However, as all of you can hopefully tell, the Vanquisher puts a strong emphasis on the game outside of combat, despite being in the fighter class. So even if you're in a campaign where you're not engaging in a lot of combat, you should still feel relevant and useful. At least if you're creative enough and your DM allows you to play to your strengths, which is, coincidentally, your strength. Finally, the Vanquisher is competitive into the later levels of the game, past 10th level. Despite reality warping spells, the Vanquisher has its niche as a self-sufficient frontline fighter into the later levels. Plus, its strong utility options, while they do become weaker over time, aren't completely invalidated. and they allow your spellcasters to pick up the slack in other areas. You can have your niche and they can have theirs, and the party can live together in harmony. Now in terms of damage, Honed Strikes is my answer to 9th level spells. Vanquishers, using the Honed Strikes feature, can go off for hundreds of damage in a turn, especially if they have advantage. I'm talking unblockable, unstoppable, raw power. Look, I'll readily admit that this subclass gets closest to all those max damage builds. You know, the ones where people calculate if every single hit was a crit, how much damage could you do? Yeah, that. This subclass can do near game-breaking damage into the later levels. But you know what? If you've gone straight Vanquisher Fighter for 18 straight levels, I'm okay with that in my games. Plus, the Echo Knight is still better at later levels, so, you know, take this with a grain of salt. Now though, we can talk about concepts. And the Vanquisher really doesn't come with a core concept, but that's its strength. A Vanquisher is a character that is just good with weapons, is accurate, and has trained their body to be their greatest strength. Honestly, you can make this subclass work with just about any character concept, which is the goal for new players. I had a new player use a Vanquisher instead of a Gunslinger Fighter. This is a subclass that gets out of the way and lets you build whatever character you want, and its mechanics will always fit that vision. Honestly, I look at the Vanquisher as a blank canvas with a few supporting pillars that the champion really doesn't provide. If you're just wanting to play a buff person with a weapon that can deal a lot of damage, look no further than the Vanquisher. However, now we can talk about multiclassing. Initially, you might be thinking of multiclassing into something like a Paladin with the Vanquisher. I mean, automatic critical hits combined with a smite sounds insane. And yes, it is, in theory. You see, the fastest that you can get Vicious Strike and Smite is 9th level. Even then, you get access to 1st level spells only. Look, I don't want to diminish all the theory crafters out there. Yes, getting one free big Smite is really good. But is it worth delaying your bloodlusted critical? Look, in most campaigns that end about 10th level, all the quote-unquote broken combos start at about 9th or 10th level with this subclass. And at that point, you're going to be dealing with tier 3 spellcaster classes as a marshal. Are some builds with this subclass powerful? Yeah, but they come online so late into the game that honestly, for many of your guys' campaigns, it seems, you'll just be on par with other spellcasters. Now, for quick multi-classes that come online fast, I recommend the Barbarian. Your reckless attack pairs so well with the Vanquisher at all levels. Rolling more dice means more chances for a critical hit at 3rd level, and if you're 7th level in a Vanquisher, that means an automatic crit every single round. The Rogue class is also a great multi-class. Not only does your expertise pair well with physical mastery, but after Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, the aim bonus action just gives easy advantage. Honestly, for a ranged Vanquisher, the Rogue multi-class is where it's at. Plus, the Assassin subclass for the Rogue shines with the Vanquisher at later levels. I'll let all of you guys in the comments come up with all the builds surrounding these two subclasses. But honestly, there are just so many great multi-classing options out there for the Vanquisher, and this is absolutely by design. If a new player wants to hop over to another class to try it out, I wanted to make a subclass that would support that decision and work with pretty much everything. So far, after all these years, it still seems to hold up with pretty much any multi-class. Although if you buy the subclass and test it out and there's a multi-class that really doesn't work, come back here in the comments and tell me about it. And speaking of faults with the Vanquisher, there are some weaknesses that this subclass has. Firstly, in combat until about 7th level, you are a basic fighter. You're going to be getting critical hits twice as often. However, sometimes the critical hits might not come. The Vanquisher has a slow trajectory towards extreme power by design. So when I tell you that it starts off simply, it does. Additionally, utility is based off player creativity and opportunities provided by the DM when we're talking about the Vanquisher. In my own games, features like physical mastery get used all the time because I give many chances to use athletics and acrobatics. This subclass offers a lot of utility for my games and other games that it's been used in. However, if your DM doesn't give or allow you those chances, well, you won't have the same utility. Or if you, as a player, aren't looking for ways to use those skill checks to your advantage. So keep that in mind if you're checking out the Vanquisher. But, you know, it's hard to give many dislikes because this is my taste in subclass. and it has worked great for my games for years. My players are very happy with the design though, so I'm probably not changing it anytime soon. So before you judge the subclass, just give it a try in an actual campaign. The Vanquisher is usually very different from a person's first take on the actual subclass, and usually it's one of the two polar opposite takes of this subclass seems incredibly weak or this subclass seems incredibly powerful. I think it lies somewhere in between, so let's get to the ratings. You guys know the drill by now. 5 categories: roleplay, offensive, defensive, utility, and X Factor. X Factor, what sets you apart from all the other fighter subclasses? For the roleplay category, I'm giving this subclass a 14 out of 20. It is a basic fighter without a strong archetype. However, the Vanquisher does have a slight focus on its physical nature and critical hits, so it does help to provide a little bit of guidance for players. However, it doesn't invoke nearly the same number of stories as a Psy Warrior, a Rune Knight, or even an Echo Knight. So for that reason, it's sitting pretty at a 14 out of 20. For its offensive rating, I'm giving the Vanquisher a 15 out of 20, 4 points higher than the Champion. Now, if you've bought the subclass and you look at its higher level features, you know clearly that the Vanquisher is better than the Champion at higher levels. I mean, past 7th level, it is significantly better. But levels 3 to 7 are the core levels for most D&D campaigns. So you're not getting those fantastic subclass features like Vicious Strike or Bloodlusted Critical too early. Now, for most of my campaigns, I take my groups to level 20. I think I've had 2 campaigns out of the last 15 that haven't gone to level 20. And if I expected all other D&D groups to do the same, then this category would be a 19 or 20 out of 20. But because my ratings are more weighted towards lower level features, I can only give this subclass a 15 out of 20. As for the defensive category, this is a 10 out of 20. Bloodlusted Critical is its only defensive ability, but you get it at 10th level. So I think it's fair to give this subclass a 10 out of 20. Because good lord, once you get to 10th level and start regaining hit points every turn, your DM will have their work cut out for them. Moving on to utility, I'm giving this subclass an 18 out of 20. You're getting great utility right from the start. And the utility features keep on coming with each subclass level up until 10th level. Even then, as time goes on, your utility features still stay relevant. They go beyond the simple proficiency features offered by other fighter subclasses. Is this a Rune Knight or Echo Knight fighter in terms of utility? Absolutely not. However, the Vanquisher still holds its own and is easier to use effectively by new players. So I'm content with giving this subclass an 18 out of 20. As for the X Factor, I'm probably a little bit biased here, but I'm going to give it an 18 out of 20. I think that this subclass does justice to critical hits. I'm taking 2 points off because the Champion technically has a few features that boost critical hits, but the Champion and the Vanquisher both play very differently. So, at the end of the day, the Vanquisher comes in with a score of 75 out of 100. I think it's better than fighter subclasses like the Gunslinger or the Eldritch Knight, but the Vanquisher is worse than things like the Rune Knight or the Samurai. Now, do you guys want to vote on the next class I'll cover? Well, the vote is going on right now on my Patreon. So get over there if you want to vote, get access to some free homebrew, and a shout out on this channel on the next video. And if you want to compare and contrast the Vanquisher with the Champion, check out this video right here. And thank you for entering the dungeon.